Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is part of Fox 12 Oregon. And on Wednesday, the city of Portland announced that as part of a $2 million grant, they planned to create a 16-block zero emission zone in downtown Portland. What that means is that access to cargo docks would be restricted to vehicles that are zero emissions, such as hydrogen, electric, cargo bikes, etc. Gas-powered vehicles would have to meet outside of that zone, unload their cargo, and then transfer that onto these other vehicles to continue their delivery. I spoke to a Portland Bureau of Transportation spokesperson, Dylan Rivera, on Wednesday, and he said that they believe that this will address some environmental concerns, some safety issues, etc., as part of this plan. Now, today, we're going to be talking to, joining me right now, we have Janet Jarvis, who is the president and CEO of the Oregon Trucking Association. Janet, thank you very much for being here with us.
Thanks for inviting me.
To start off, could we just get a little bit of a background on the Oregon Trucking Association itself and what it does and what it is involved in?
Absolutely. The Oregon Trucking Association has been around since the 1930s. We are the trade association for the trucking industry. We do a number of things, including providing education, hosting a number of events. But one of the most important things we do on behalf of our members is provide advocacy at the state and local level. And on that behalf, I have been part of the Portland Freight Committee for a number of years and have been chairing it for the last 3 or 4 years.
So with this, understanding that, and I appreciate that background on that, tell us about when you found out about the zero emission zone.
I was invited to come to a press conference Friday afternoon prior, but without any details. I happened to be in Washington, D.C. over the weekend and up until Tuesday night. And right before I got on the plane on Tuesday, I opened up the email to see what the press conference was even about, to recognize that this was the issue that they were going to be addressing. And so I sent them an email and let them know that I would not be participating in that event.
Okay, and why is that?
Well, a couple of reasons. First off, I do, as I mentioned, I do chair the Freight Committee. We have never had a single discussion about this proposal. This grant proposal came together last fall. We meet monthly. There were a lot of opportunities to talk about what the city of Portland was hoping to accomplish with this, how they plan to enact it, what the problems could be surrounding the policy change. None of those conversations ever happened. Also, as president and CEO of the Trucking Association, you would think that they would have reached out under that mantra to discuss this issue with me. Trucking is going through a lot of change. There's a lot of technological change happening in the trucking industry now, but the ability to just quickly jump to zero emission vehicles, all vehicle classes and types, is just not there yet. So it's premature, very premature.
So access to these specific cargo docks that would be within that zone, as we mentioned, they would have to be zero emission vehicles under this proposal if this goes, continues as planned. What are some of the obstacles that the trucking industry has on when it comes to that, when it comes to zero emission vehicles?
Well, in the larger vehicle sizes, there are some manufacturers that are making battery electric, but those particular vehicles don't travel very far. If you fill a diesel-powered truck up with fuel, you can travel 1,000 to 1,500 miles. And typically, particularly for our over-the-road carriers, their drivers will plan to go about 500 miles a day. A battery electric truck will only go about 200 miles, maybe 250, depending on weather, depending on terrain and all of that. And so it just doesn't fit into our operation very easily now. Since we haven't had the conversation with the city of Portland, I'm not even sure what kind of goods they are receiving in that zone. So it's difficult for me to discuss this in very great detail. But I do know there are electric delivery vans for smaller items, et cetera. But there are a number of things that are delivered to those buildings that I'm sure would need to come in on much larger trucks. And that just isn't going to be feasible here in the short term.
So, not feasible then from a technological standpoint as far as those vehicles aren't available. Mm-hmm. Now, currently, what kinds of deliveries, if we, in general downtown, I know we don't know the exact zone. We do have what was proposed originally, which is this right here. They did say that this could change, but taking, for example, of this zone there off of the Hawthorne Bridge, how many large trucks are delivering goods down there?
I wish I could answer that, Greg. I don't
Okay.
know the answer to that. Like I said, I have just learned of this. I'm just starting to reach out to my members to see who would be impacted by this. I don't have all the details yet.
Okay. Going from there then, and you know, again, kind of extrapolating out from the trucking industry where we're at now, as far as gas-powered vehicles, is that kind of a long-term goal to go to electric or zero-emission vehicles? Is that something that is in the timeline as far as if the technology were available?
Well, the industry's been evolving quickly. And I think one of the things that gets left out of this conversation is how much change there has been in diesel equipment over the last decade. If you take a look at a truck in 2023 and the emissions that come out of that vehicle, they are about 98, 99% reduced from a truck from the 1980s. In fact, I've seen some statistics that say it would take 60 large Class 8 semis today to equal the emissions from a truck from the 80s. So there's been a lot of technological change in the equipment that we have currently. There are under development a lot of battery electric vehicles in all different class sizes, and even in the class size 8s. I know Daimler is producing Class 8 trucks, semis, but as I mentioned earlier, they have a range issue. They're also terribly expensive. So if you look at the inefficiencies of being able to use that for over-the-road applications and the fact that you're going to pay significantly more for that truck, it just doesn't pencil out for most carriers. There is some talk about moving to hydrogen fuel cells. So I think we will see over the next handful of years some real change in our industry. But we have to remember that diesel trucks last a long time. They're an investment, a very major investment for trucking companies. And there's got to be some time in this transition process to move towards that goal.
So when it comes to the city of Portland, have you reached out to them since this announcement, or is there a plan to interact with them to discuss some of these issues?
Well, I'm still chairing the freight committee. I'm sure we'll have some interaction. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, anything else that you would like to add in there just about this issue?
Well, I do think it's interesting that in the announcement I saw some press a couple of days ago that the city of Portland had indicated they had made some outreach to Beeline Urban Delivery, who would supposedly take the products that couldn't be delivered on the diesel powered trucks in that area, and we'd have a spot where we could drop them and then they would pick them up and deliver them there. And there are a couple of issues with that. First and foremost, we know that will add cost. So if you're in one of those buildings in that region and your product is going to be handled multiple times, it's going to cost you more to receive those goods. But secondly, I find it interesting that they've had these discussions and contracted with a company without ever putting this out for bid. There's been no public discussion about any of that. And so I'm very concerned about the process that the city of Portland went through to establish this program.
Well, Jenna, thank you very much for joining us, to express your concerns with this and your side of this issue. It's certainly something that I'm sure we'll hear a lot about going forward, however this progresses. And thank you very much for joining me here today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for asking.
All right, there we go. So that was Janet Jarvis, who is the president and CEO of the Oregon Trucking Association, discussing that zero emission zone that is proposed by the city of Portland. You can find my other interview at Fox 12 Now as well, speaking to the city of Portland.